Oh, what was up with all the baseball reposts last night on Blue Skies? There was like 3 straight hours of baseball from me. Last night was crazy. It was game three of the World Series against the Blue Jays and the Dodgers, and it went for 18 innings, matching the longest postseason game in history. Here's my thing about this World Series is that I'm a Mariners fan, a Seattle Mariners fan. And if you don't know, the Seattle Mariners, they won their division and they made it to the last series before the World Series against the Blue Jays. And it was a 7 game series and it went all the way to game seven. It was tied, it was winner take all. It's the closest the Mariners have ever gotten to the World Series at any point in the team's history, and they lost. They lost game seven. It was very sad. It's whatever. I'm over it now. It happened. From the Blue Jays' performance in the World Series at this point, it's pretty clear that we were lucky to get all the way to game seven with them. The fact that they have given the Dodgers as much trouble as they have is indication that it was heroic of us to get as far as we did. So anyway, the Blue Jays trounced us in Game Seven and went on to the World Series against the Dodgers. So I've been roundly rooting against the Blue Jays. Last night was Game Three. The Blue Jays have won one. The Dodgers have won one. So they're tied in the 7 game series. At this point in the game, I think it's by the seventh or eighth inning, they were tied 5-5. And at that point, nobody scores for until the 18th inning. Flashback to game five of the division series against the Detroit Tigers? I think that's right. I can't remember. I'm bad at other team names, where we went into extras and we won in the 15th inning with a big walk-off hit. So that was a big deal. And the Mariners, we have a long history with extra inning games. We did a shit ton of innings against the Houston Astros in 2022, and they beat us there. We beat the Tigers in 15 innings. We've done a bunch of like really crazy extra inning games in the regular season. So it feels like this is just sort of Mariners baseball, is that we're really good at holding people scoreless while our offense just sort of swings and misses at balls. So I was reveling throughout the night at this scoreless game because that is what it's like watching Mariners baseball all the time. And everybody was suffering. Everybody was like, is this baseball game ever going to end? And everybody was shit posting, and the shit posting was great. And I was just feeding on the collective misery of millions because I didn't have a horse in this race. I'm rooting for the Dodgers. I'm rooting against the Blue Jays. But at the point where you're going into extras and it's like up to like 11 and 12, my feeling is what I want is for it to go on forever, because theoretically a baseball game can go on forever. There is no clock that says, okay, come on guys, it's over, everybody go home. If it's tied and nobody is scoring, it just goes. The longest baseball game in history, I think, was 32 or 33 innings. So I was rooting for the sport of baseball. I was rooting for the idea of this being something that happens to you whether you want it or not, and I was living for it. It was I could barely get to sleep last night. I was like vibrating after that happened because I just felt like I was just full of electricity. I was alive, man. I was it was so good. It was so awesome. So that's why I was posting baseball all through the night. Let me check up on the chat here. I've got weird feelings about the topic of the World Series. I'm glad to hear about it from you because it means I didn't learn about it from transphobic family. Ah, yeah. So this is the thing. I've been working on this script for a while now. I know I say this constantly. I've been working on this script for a while now titled Give Sports a Chance. It's still very rough. It's very long right now, and it's going to get longer because I got to talk about the Mariners not making it to the World Series and definitely talk about this game. But basically, I was a dedicated sports hater for the vast majority of my life. I hated sports. I hated what they represented. I came up in the Bush era, so all I saw was football and the national anthem. And then, much to my surprise, at like age 29, I fell in with a group of people and met a autistic trans woman who shares many of my interests in culture and who was also really into sports. And She was the first person ever who was able to explain sports to me in a way that I could understand them. And suddenly, oh my God, I get sports now. What the fuck? It just sort of happened slowly. It started with F1, actually. Formula One is a good gateway drug for sports because it's very anime in a very particular way. I won't get into it. There's a lot in sports for people who are not Christo fascist ethno nationalists. You know, one of the crux points that I want to make is that it's important that we give a shit about sports because like conservatives clearly give a lot of shit about sports to the point where trans people participating in sports, especially trans women, is a major topic of conversation and controversy. Fucking Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom went on the record a few days ago saying, I don't think trans women should be able to participate in sports, and I would like to pass a law to ban them from participating. Fucking Democrat. I hate Gavin Newsom. Anyway, I think the fact that they see this as such a essential locus of culture and of like gender roles is an indication that it is a place where we can put up a great deal of resistance. And I'm actually very much of the belief, and this is one of my, it's crazy that it is this way. It's one of my more like, maybe not controversial, but certainly a take that I don't see many other people having. I believe that gender desegregation in sports is one of the most important things that we should be fighting for as leftists on like it's below the basics of like healthcare, public transit, housing, etc. But when we're talking about cultural reproduction, the reason why conservatives are so concerned with education and what parents' rights are is that they understand whatever people feel now, there's only so much you can do about that. The goal is to control the youth of tomorrow, to condition them to be on your side. And, you know, the extent to which that's ever going to be effective is up for debate. But I think that it is essential that we accept that, like, cultural reproduction is a major part of any leftist program on a national scale. That means, like, not just better education in terms of being honest about America's awful, awful history, but also restructuring things in a way that creates more pro-social opportunities for people to mix across classes. I think we should abolish private schools and certainly like charter schools and shit and across gender divides. I think the division between men and women's sports is a profound foundation of how we understand gender in this country. The thing that everybody will say is like, well, but there's, you know, biological differences. It's not fair to have a man who's taking female hormones against to have play against women or whatever. That's not fair. And some people who would defend trans women in sports will say, well, actually, statistically, trans women suck in sports. So it's not even really, and I just don't think that that's the way to go. For me, I think what's really at stake here is that the very idea that trans women participating in sports is unfair is an indication that our entire conception of fairness is deeply eugenicist, that it is attached to a blood deep commitment to the nuclear family, to heterosexual and patriarchal structures of society. And we need to deconstruct these things at every level that's possible. And I think genuinely, our idea of fairness in sports is insane. You know, we have to have it biologically pure. We have to have it be a purely fair expression of superiority of different kinds of people or whatever. And there's an extent to which, like, there's always going to be biological advantages and disadvantages, but that's not an indicator of an absolute truth. That's just different people having different skills. So many of my feelings about the way forward politically come down to we need to decide to do things in a way that is less efficient, that is not maximally economically productive, because that is better for us as people and that is better for society in the long term. We have to root out the profit motive and the idea of absolute of like mathematically perfecting everything down to like having it all be a machine. We need to reconstruct fairness in a way that it does allow trans people to participate in sports, and it allows women to participate in men's sports and men to participate in women's sports. And if you're really worried about like serious biological issues in terms of like size and weight, like weight class exists. You can just have divisions based on weight class. Like it's not going to be a universal thing. There's always going to be case by case basis depending on the sport. That's just true in general of anything. It's always going to be on a case by case basis. But the idea that it has to be on these gendered lines is so disgusting and so insidious. And it's something that so many people refuse to acknowledge or question. And that's why I think it's such an important thing. It feels to me like desegregating sports along gender lines is an electric red hot third rail in the public conversation right now that is probably not, I don't want to get too dramatic because I know this kind of thing, there's plenty of reasons, like it's not the same exactly, but it feels like when I read about how people reacted to we need to desegregate in the 50s along racial lines, you read like just average people's like writings about that at the time, and it's like it's just not feasible. There's just so many reasons why it doesn't work, and there's all these like, there are different kinds of people, and this separation, it's not, it's not just racism, it's something else. There's always these like cultural preconceptions that are informing the dichotomy that just nobody wants to question, and they think, oh well, you change it, you change everything, and it's, that's so scary, and then you desegregate. And it's like, oh, what changed? Basically nothing besides the fact that Black people have more opportunities. And of course, desegregation came with, like so many other civil rights wins in American history, came with sort of a reclassification of discrimination into a legal framework that, gave white supremacists an excuse to be racist anyway, just doing so within a acceptable framework. But even still, even with that being the case, it does have a profound impact. And I very also remember when I was in college in like 2010, I was in an English class and we did a mock debate where it was the entire class versus the teacher. And the question was, should we repeal don't ask, don't tell in the military? Which, if you're not familiar, don't ask, don't tell was the policy of you are not allowed to be openly gay in the military. If you say so, you can be kicked out. You're allowed, but you're not allowed to tell, and nobody's allowed to ask. I could give a shit about the military, right? But this was a proxy for a much larger national conversation about, do we legalize gay marriage? Are gay people allowed to be in public and out? And this is in Oklahoma. Where I was going to college. And this is 2010. This is 15 years ago. This is not that long ago. We sort of like debated who takes what side. And the class overwhelmingly said, we want to defend don't ask, don't tell. So it was the teacher's job to defend the idea of repealing don't ask, don't tell. And this was meant to be an intellectual exercise about debate, the way that these kinds of things often are, where you're not meant to be like actually taking a side, you're meant to be exercising your rhetorical skills. But it became clear to me very, very quickly that this was not a rhetorical exercise for the vast majority of people, that they felt like it was very common sense and obvious that gay people should not be able to be like public in public life. Not even not even that. Not even that they shouldn't be, but that we weren't ready for it. That we weren't ready on a national level. Like maybe they should be allowed to be themselves in public eventually, but not right now. Not right now. We're not ready for it. It was such a huge turning point for me. And I, like, in the class, I eventually was like, okay, I know this is supposed to be a rhetorical exercise, but it really feels like you people actually believe that gay people shouldn't be allowed to be out in public. And that's fucking crazy to me. And there was like one other person in that class who agreed with me. And everybody else was like, well, that's just how it is. And it like brought me to the edge of tears that it was so blasé to them, that it was just so like obvious that this is just how it is. And then, of course, they legalized gay marriage. They repealed don't ask, don't tell. And what happened? fucking nothing besides the fact that gay people get to live. And now it's just normal. Now everybody acts like everybody was always on in this in the corner of gay people. This also applied to trans people. Trans people were generally like well accepted. Like when I came out as trans in Oklahoma, I did not have problems getting HRT in 2018. I went to a women's clinic that did abortions. It was not Planned Parenthood. It was an independent place in Oklahoma that was specific to Oklahoma, and they did not ask any questions. They said on my first appointment, we do need a letter from your therapist saying that you do have gender. However, you clearly are the kind of person who has done your research, whatever, whatever. I'm going to give you your prescription right now anyway. So I walked out of my first appointment with an HRT prescription. That's in Oklahoma in 2018. It was just fine. This was just fine. And then they invented this moral panic out of nothing. They sort of cooked it up in the UK as a test case, a test kitchen for all of these transphobic arguments. And now they're outsourcing them back to America to try to do the same thing here. I don't think it's really working because America is such a big fucking country. You just can't really do it. It just doesn't work the same way. So my feeling about desegregating sports on gender lines is very much that everybody who's like, no, we're not ready, it's too complicated. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. It's never been true. We're ready when we do it. And we have to do it as soon as possible. The people that it will actually affect are the kids who have not had this idea of how deeply rooted this societal gender gap is concretized in their brain. They are flexible. They will grow up. It's the old people who don't play sports anymore who are worried about this shit. They're gonna be dead in a few years. Who fucking cares? It's the future we're fighting for, not the present. I believe that in the future we can have like a society where everybody is equal, even if you hate sports. And I used to be somebody who hated sports. Even if you think sports suck, they're there and they're not going away. People have always played sports. It's not going away, ever. If it's such a huge part of culture, then we have to accept that it is a place for cultural reproduction. It is a place where our values and our ideas are reproduced on a massive scale, and it teaches people how to behave and what to believe, even in just the smallest of ways. We have to accept that that is a battleground for the future that we want to build. That's my rant on the subject. I'm sorry, I totally went off on a tangent there. I just feel very passionately about this. I went from being somebody who really did not give a shit about sports to somebody who cares about sports way more than I ever thought that I would. And I really only care about F1 and baseball. I don't think I'll ever get into football. There's too many fucking commercials. The thing is, once you learn about sports, once you have an entry point and you like have something that you understand that makes a sport interesting, you start looking at other sports and you realize like, oh, there's so many different axes upon which this thing is judged. And the public conversation is always about who wins, who loses. But there's so much more about that. And that's why I think F1 is such a good gateway drug for sports, because that is a sport that's, it's a race. Whoever's in first, second, and third, they're the ones who are on the podium. There are 20 cars on the grid. There are 10 teams. The vast majority of them are going to lose. If you're playing a racing video game, if you finish outside of the top 3, that's a hard reset, start over from scratch type situation. But in real life, in F1, the top 10 finishers get points. So the person who finishes first gets 25 points. Whoever finishes in 10th gets 1 point, and it's graded from there. So half of the grid finishes every F1 race without any points. There are teams that score 3-4 points a season. And for them, every single point is a life or death battle. And the drivers that come up in those systems are trying to prove themselves. So you have battles happening in no man's land for like 15th, 16th position. Nothing on the line, and they're still driving like everything is on the line, because in that moment it is. I think that's awesome. And that's like the gateway into sports for me, is realizing that actually the losers are what sports is all about. When you win, that happens every once in a while, and the victory, it lasts for a few minutes and then it's over, and then you have to get right back to work and do it all again. And that's just life. And this is why I'm a Mariners fan, because they are constantly losing. If you have not watched the John Boy's documentary about the Mariners, go watch it. Go fucking watch it. It's so good. And I think it does a great job. It's not just specifically a history of the Mariners, but it's also an examination of the sport of baseball through a team that has had like mostly losses and then has also paradoxically had some of the greatest players in the history of baseball. And I think it's a great way to get into the sport in terms of like the stories that it tells. And this is why I was not overly heartbroken that the Mariners didn't make it into the World Series because I got into this team by the fact that they're losers. And so it felt like it would be almost too easy for me to get in just in time for them to finally make it to the World Series. I know I need to suffer. I want to suffer. I want to feel the divine tragedy of my team coming so close and then falling short. Because that's a beautiful story. And it's a story that will continue to fight next year. It's going to be the undercurrent of the whole season. And that's awesome. That's so exciting. Yeah, so that's all my sports rants. I basically just did the whole video that I've been writing without all the autobiographical element. Okay, let me catch up on chat because I've been fucking ranting for a hot minute. Weirdly, conservatives also hate sports now. It's like they hate sex and beer. It's all gay and woke now. Yeah, that's the other thing is that there like a lot of teams. I don't know about football, but like in baseball, all but I think the Texas Rangers have Pride Nights. I've been to multiple Seattle Mariners Pride Nights where they give out hats and sometimes jerseys that have the pride flag on them that has the trans colors. I feel so welcome as a queer person at T-Mobile Park. And that's just not something that I expected to be true. And there are so many other people who look like me who go to those games sometimes. And it's beautiful when you realize that you have a community and that you're connected to people who live in the same place to you as you by no like serious like common interests or ideological shared positions or anything. You can like hate each other and still like the same team. I don't know. I think that kind of mass community connection is really essential in an era when the avenues of digital communication as controlled by corporations have procedurally eroded our sort of large scale cultural connections and consensus reality itself. Imperfection is part of the human condition. Our society cannot exist in a state where perfection is the expectation, lest it reject humanity itself. Exactly. That's what the fascists want. That's what the futurists were all about. And now you've got people who insist that they're not Nazis literally sharing the futurist manifesto and being like, these guys had their heads on right. No, I didn't. No, I didn't, man. See, sports have become a means of showcasing biological superiority in the eyes of a lot of people, at the very least since the 1930s. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can certainly draw a line to the German Olympics when Hitler was there, and I think there's certainly things to be drawn about the fact that we largely rehabilitated Nazis without actually uprooting their ideology, and this happened also in Germany. So that strand of thinking was never really eradicated, and of course, the Nazis got a lot of their ideas from us because we were the world's leading eugenicists. See, I think Kate's argument that weight classes lead to brutal and not good dieting practices, but yeah, I can see weight classes having their own issues. Here's my feeling about any of these massive social society level changes. None of them is going to work perfectly right out the gate, and that's something that we have to reconcile ourselves to from the beginning, because there are going to be New York Times opinion columnists, assuming we don't storm the offices and seize the New York Times for the people. There are always going to be opinion columnists saying, look, it failed because it didn't do everything it promised to do within like a week. This is a project that is going to take the rest of our lives. There are going to be failures. People are going to get hurt. And we have to accept that the attempt to build a better society is more valuable and better for people than accepting the status quo, which is, as a matter of course, already killing and hurting more people every single day than will ever be negatively affected by this kind of attempted transformative change. But they will always seek to hold up these failures as evidence that the entire thing is corrupt and totally impossible. And I think it's really important that we understand this as just the cost of doing business. And if we're not prepared to just say like, well, fuck you. We have to expect this level of attack. And like, yeah, so there's going to be flaws with like weight class, but we have to try something. There has to be something that we can do that's better than what we have right now, and we're not going to figure that out in a lab. We're just not. You have to start somewhere.